12:03. I would like to welcome all of you to this, I believe it's the 8th in our series of 12 presentations in the Sustainability Research and Practice Seminar. My name is Bradley Flam. I'm the Director of the Office of Sustainability. Our office, along with the Office for Research and Sponsored Programs, the Office of Digital Learning and Innovation, and the Sustainability Council's Scholarly and Creative Activities Committee. We are all co-sponsoring this series, and we are very glad that you have joined us here today. Please remember that there are 4 more presentations every Wednesday at noon at the same logon. Next week, we are looking forward to hearing from our colleague in the Center for Civic Engagement and Social Impact, Shannon Gillespie, speaking with 2 students who are part of the RAM Corps program. So please don't miss that and the following presentations through April 28th. So without any further ado, I would like to thank Professor Alessandria and pass the digital floor to you.
Thank you, Bradley. Welcome, everybody. Some of you I know, some of you I don't. So hopefully by the end of this, we'll get to know each other a little bit better. Just in the interest of time, I'll kind of go through the slides first and then invite you to ask questions after. And I apologize for the allergy season that is probably affecting everybody. So this is Dogs Stress and Tests, Oh My, a wellness program for students taking a high stakes test. Kind of ties into the sustainability theme 3 of good health and well-being. And a little bit about me is I have a rescue. Her name is Stormy and she is a beagle. And I got her certified as a therapy dog in 2018. At the time, she had developed a serious health issue and her immune system was totally compromised because of it. And so just as she was graduating from her therapy dog training, we were pretty much told she couldn't volunteer because of her immune compromised state and her health issues. As her health improved, I wanted to find opportunities for her to fulfill her purpose. She is a very purpose-driven dog. She loves people. She loves other dogs. And for any of you who've known beagles in the past, they can be really high energy, but she's super chill. She's just sleeping at my feet all of the time. And so I thought, what can I do on campus that might help our students? And this presentation is the outgrowth of that. So let's see here. So our objectives for today: to describe a wellness program implemented for students taking a high stakes test. These particular students are counselor education students taking their comprehensive exam, which is an exit exam that their graduation hinges upon. Discussing a little bit of the research on the effectiveness of interacting with a certified therapy dog on student stress and anxiety during high stakes testing. Identify some practical strategies to implement animal-assisted intervention on college campuses, and to identify at least 3 considerations that must be addressed prior to incorporating therapy dogs in outreach programming. So animal-assisted interventions, before I actually go into that, let me explain the difference between a therapy dog, a service dog, and an emotional support animal, because they are 3 totally separate things. I'll start with what we're not talking about, which are service animals who have been trained to perform a particular task for a person who has a disability, and they are considered similar to an assistive device or a wheelchair. They are there to support that individual, and others should not be interacting with or distracting that animal while they're on the job. Emotional support animals have gotten a lot of attention in the news. They, in particular, have gotten a lot of press for being on airplanes and causing havoc there. So emotional support animals are not required to have any particular training. They are intended to support a person who needs that emotional support from having that animal around. They have to have a letter from a mental health professional indicating that there's a need for that animal, but it's a very unregulated thing that's gaining a lot of attention, and the field of counseling is working a lot towards address that. Therapy animals are different because they are intended to interact with a wide range of people. They're intended to interact with the public, and they are required to be temperament tested. They're required to have training, have insurance, and have a certification and designation. You may have seen recently in the news, they were sending some therapy dogs out to Colorado to assist with the aftermath of the shootings there. So therapy animals have gained a lot of attention. They're growing in popularity. You probably know people who've gotten pandemic pets, pandemic puppies. Those might be more sort of the emotional support unless they're actually getting some training. And so what we're talking about here are animal-assisted interventions, which is different than a therapeutic application in counseling or psychotherapy. So animal-assisted interventions have a lot of applications on college campuses. Our campus in particular, we have Muddy, who is sort of the mascot and an ambassador, and works as a facility dog in the counseling center on campus. But then the counseling center also does a lot of outreach programming, bringing other therapy dogs to campus. And Stormy has participated in some of those events. It is gaining in popularity because it's relatively cheap and it can reach a large number of people with very few resources. And on college campuses in particular, if we can address students' stress and their needs that don't rise to the level of needing therapy, we can really get a lot of bang for the buck, so to speak, in terms of helping students manage and cope with stressful times. So this is Stormy. She is, as I said, a beagle. She is probably between 8 and 10 years old now. And this was her at a therapy dog extravaganza, which the counseling center puts on during finals week. In a study from 2017, the prevalence of animal-assisted intervention programs, 62% of surveyed colleges had current stress relief programs using animals. Some of the listservs that I'm on with respect to counseling in college campuses, there's been an uptick in the number of requests for how do I initiate a therapy dog or therapy animal program on our campus? And there are a wide variety of ways that a person could do that. 86 of the programs in this particular study, 86% mostly used dogs, and about 15% used dogs, cats, or other species. So therapy dogs are the most popular. So the problem has been documented in the literature that elevated perceived stress prior to high stakes tests is associated with lower predicted grades, feelings of being less prepared for exams, and a negative view of their courses that they completed. And your test performance can be influenced by excessive negative feelings, which are common among stress-induced college students. Some of those stressors could be homesickness or friend sickness. We might even put in pet sickness there, sleep deprivation, feeling overwhelmed, depression, and anxiety. There was a program Stormy did probably around Thanksgiving of 2019, I have to remember my years. It was before the pandemic, and Residence Hall had us come in the night that everybody was coming back from their Thanksgiving break, and it was the first time we'd had a whole week off for Thanksgiving. And they were so missing their pets that they had just left. They felt like their pets had just accepted them back home from being gone for so long. It actually caused a bit more distress in them, I think, more than it helped them at that particular moment in time. So picking the timing of when we do these programs is probably important. So some of the supporting evidence for animal-assisted intervention programs, that interacting with therapy animals can lower anxiety and loneliness, and it's a way to assist students on campus whose needs may not warrant ongoing counseling. And it's also relatively cheap. So a couple of studies about the effectiveness. I'm just going to cover two rather quickly here before I get into the program and how we designed it. So a randomized controlled trial evaluated the effects of animal-assisted intervention to reduce college students' stress the week before their final exams, similar to what we do, although I think we do it during exam week so they can drop in and out on their way between exams. After the experimental group was able to interact with dogs and cats for 10 minutes, and these particular animals were not trained, they were shelter animals that were brought in, and each individual one had a handler associated with it. The control group watched a 10-minute slideshow of the dogs and the cats, and the waitlist group was assessed while waiting for 10 minutes for their turn to interact with the dogs and the cats. And the outcome was that the experimental group, the ones who actually got to interact with the dogs and the cats, and again, these were not trained dogs and cats, had higher levels of contentment and lower levels of irritability and anxiety compared to both of the other groups. So we see that there are health benefits, and I think if you've chosen to attend today, you're probably in the camp where you recognize that interacting with pets can be helpful. You know, just the soothing touch of their fur, petting them has benefits for blood pressure, among other things. So in another study, Ward Griffin examined the effect of pre-exam therapy dog drop-in events on student well-being. And this particular study added the element of time, the variable of time. So what they did is the experimental group completed the questionnaire right before and right after interacting with therapy dogs. So this time they were trained therapy dogs. And then they completed it 10 hours later to see, do these effects last beyond the immediate interaction? And then the delayed treatment control group, they completed all the measures before and after so they completed them 3 times without ever interacting with the animals. And the outcome was that the therapy dog sessions had strong immediate benefits in terms of stress reduction, increased happiness and energy levels, and greater improvement in negative affect, perceived social support, and perceived stress than the delayed treatment control group. And you're going to see those 3 things also happened in the wellness program that I did for my students. However, the effects didn't persist. So after several hours, the effects were actually quite small. So the proximity of the intervention to the exam is important. So this is Stormy interacting with some of the actual students right before their test. The purpose was to not only ease their stress and anxiety prior to taking their comprehensive exam, but also to introduce counselors in training to the benefits of animal-assisted intervention through an outreach program. We have 2 programs currently. One is for school counseling and one is clinical mental health counseling. And the incorporation of animals into therapy or animal-assisted interventions is relatively new and growing in a lot of attention. So this was a way to educate them a little bit about a new intervention that we're probably not talking about regularly in their curriculum, which I've developed an elective course on animal-assisted therapy. So now a couple of groups of students have done that, but it's an elective, it's not required. So this was an introduction to that as well. And the way the program works, first, let me tell you a little bit about the test. This is a test that they have 4 hours to take, and it starts at 11 in the morning. So it's over the lunch hour. So we always have snacks at the event. And there's a lot of stress. And the first, I've done the program 3 times. The first time was before I had the IRB approval, so I don't really have a lot of data. And then I did it in the spring and fall of 2019. We were supposed to do it last March, but obviously the pandemic interrupted that. So the program opens about 45 minutes before they take their test, and the test parameters are very strict. They're only allowed to bring in their keys and their ID. They can't have a bottle of water, they can't have a jacket, they can't bring anything else with them. And that's important because some of the tools we have in the wellness room besides the animals involved like mindfulness coloring pages, which as I learned more about the rules of the test, I tweaked some of the instructions so that they could pick things up from me later, because I didn't realize they couldn't bring their coloring with them. So a lot of people were kind of not participating in that. So the other thing that's unique here is that students are interacting with a faculty member who's known to them, and they're interacting with peers who they've been going through the program with. they may not know all their peers that were in the other program, but I'm sort of a common thread. And so while they're going around the room and they're interacting with the animals, they're interacting with me and interacting with each other, I'm able to remind them of things that they know, make affirming statements like, you've had to pass tests before, you're going to do it again. What reason do you have to think you wouldn't pass it? And reminding them what they already know. So it's a very warm and supportive atmosphere. I've also been able to bring a recent graduate in who's already taken the test, who can answer questions about their experience and kind of relieve stress that way. So it's a little bit different than like the large scale therapy dog extravaganza during finals week. It's more targeted in terms of its intervention. So these are a couple examples of the marketing tools. My graduate assistants have created them for me, and who can't resist an adorable little dog like Stormy. You see that she has a t-shirt on in one of the pictures. Stormy has a condition called calcinosis cutis that was a side effect of taking prednisone long-term. So she has some plaques on her back that turned into where her skin turned into bone. So I do that, or at that point, her fur hadn't grown back. So I did that to hide that and prevent people from being a little freaked out by that. But I think it's actually not a bad thing that they see that she's not perfect. It's a nice metaphor and reminder that you can still be fulfilled and be purposeful even without being perfect. So what do we have in the room? We have a sign-in sheet, so I know who to survey afterwards. And I also am able to contact our assessment coordinator to look at their scores on the exam to know, did they pass or didn't they pass, to see if there were any patterns. We have therapy dogs. We've done it where we had just Stormy. We've done it where we had some additional therapy dogs. It was a little bit too distracting to have too many handlers in the room. And then one of my graduate assistants has a certified therapy dog herself. So having somebody who'd been in the program bringing their therapy dog was more effective than having some strangers in the room with therapy dogs. So that who the handler is in this particular intervention makes a difference. We always have volunteers, and we coordinate with the Counseling Honor Society. They donate the snacks, and they offer personnel to help us with setting up and breaking down. And that also is another opportunity for them to gain some community service and see what an animal-assisted intervention program might look like, as well as it's built a lot of momentum for them to encourage others or themselves to come when it's their turn to take the test. I have tons of fidget toys that I've collected from conferences over the years: stress balls, fidget spinners, meditation balls. We have coloring supplies and mindfulness coloring pages. We just photograph a few coloring pages, small ones, simple ones. We put inspirational quotes around the room. We have snacks, and we have the worry jar. So the worry jar is you just take a piece of paper and you write your worry and put it in the jar. So it's sort of like putting it in a container and you can walk away from it. And the same concept for the gratitude jar. And we set up stations all around the room. And we've learned, and we also put the inspirational quotes all around the room. And that has really evolved and gotten a little easier over time. These are some examples of mindfulness coloring, stress balls, the meditation balls. So after the event, I survey the students the first business day. So they take the exam on a Friday. It's a 5-minute survey that they can take through Qualtrics. So it's on their phone, wherever, and it really is a 5-minute survey. It's very, very brief. So we have a brief amount of demographic information. Why did you choose to attend? And the demographics is mostly, did you attend or didn't you? Which program you're in, and maybe gender. Why did they choose to attend or not attend? It's self-reported rating of their stress level before entering the wellness space and after leaving it. It's not a validated scale, just a 5-point scale. And then asking them, what did they use in the wellness space, and a rank order of how helpful the tools that they used were, and whether they found it helpful at all that there was a wellness event. Information about how we advertise, so we know what to keep doing or do differently. And then some open-ended questions about why they chose to attend, the effect that participating had on them, and specifically questions about their interactions with the therapy dog and any suggestions for future events. So the students are self-selecting in, so we don't worry so much about like if somebody has allergies or a reason that they or a phobia of animals, they just can self-select out. I have had students who have animal allergies and even fear of animals come, and we were very respectful of that. And we always ask them if they would like to visit with the animal before approaching. And I knew that about the particular student before they came, but they really wanted that social interaction and support. So they chose to come anyway. And the snacks are also a draw because sometimes they're a little anxious to eat their breakfast, and having a little snack bar or a donut before they go into the event can feel better. The budget is approximately $30, so it's pretty cheap. And again, that's because the Counseling Honor Society has offered to support the snacks, and I've collected those other resources over the years, and they were one-time costs. I don't factor in the cost of her certification because that's something that we'd be doing no matter what. And volunteer organizations, that would be something they would have been offering if we brought in volunteers. One other thing that is important to note is no two iterations of this event have been quite exactly the same. So the first time we offered it in fall of 2018, we had no IRB, no data, and that was just an opportunity for Stormy. She was still pretty much recovering from her health issues, and for me to just test things out, see how it went. In the spring of 2019, we had 3 dogs. 2 of the dogs were from the organization Stormy was certified through, and so they were handlers who were not really familiar with the program. And I had 4 volunteer students from the Counseling Honor Society or students who had taken the animal assisted therapy course with me in the summer of 2019 who were interested in it. And one of those students was a graduate from the program. And so that was a happy accident to be able to have somebody who'd already taken the test there. And that turned out to be something that we really wanted incorporated in the fall of 2019. And my graduate assistant from spring 2019 had graduated. She was the one who had a therapy dog that was certified as well. So she came back and what was the other therapy dog in the room. And so again, who the handler is in this particular program makes an important difference. We also had to move the exam to main campus because the students had to take the exam on computers, and the computers at the Graduate Center were just not really up to date and equipped. So we needed them in computer labs. Our students could otherwise go through their entire program, never setting foot on main campus. So a lot of them were anxious about where am I going to park? How am I going to find the building and all of that? So by having to come to campus an hour before they had to be at the exam, that also helped them to de-stress a little bit. Like it gave them a buffer. The other thing that was important for that fall 2019, there had been a huge storm the night before. I think tornadoes had come through the area and there were a lot of closed roads. So students who had actually planned to come to the event might not have made it to the event, but because they planned to come to the event, they were able to make it to the exam on time. And some of them, I think, ended up answering the survey, and that came up in terms of reasons why they didn't attend. So you probably want to know what the results were. So this is the self-reported stress. Again, the question was, please rate your test-related stress when you arrived at the testing site on a scale of 1 to 5. You'll see the range was from 2 to 5, and these numbers include everybody. And the mean was 3.75. So that's between moderately and very stressed. And we had 20 respondents here. In the spring of that was the spring of 2019. Their self-reported stress after participating in the event was 2.41. Nobody was at a 4 or a 5, and the range was from only 1 to 3. So the mean dropped 1.34 points. In the fall of 2019, we had 22 people participate. The range again was from 2 to 5 with a mean of 3.73. And the results dropped to another 1.29 points, very similar to the spring of 2019. 16 people responded. Again, we had that storm that affected people's ability to get to the event. And so very similar in terms of the drop in stress, and exactly the same in terms of nobody was at a 4 or 5 after the event and before going into the exam. So let's get a little deeper. So we had those open-ended questions, and we pulled out some themes from those open questions. And these are themes from across both surveys. So one theme that came out in terms of why they chose to attend was social support from peers and faculty. So again, this particular event has participants interacting with animals and peers that they know, as opposed to going to a large scale event over in Sykes Student Union, where they're really focused on just interacting with the dogs or maybe dropping in on their way to the food court. So to be around peers before the exam, instead of being in my own head, we were all feeling stressed. So to be together for support was really helpful. So the idea of knowing that you're not alone was important. Because I thought it would be helpful, I wanted to see the dogs, and I thought chatting with classmates and Professor Alessandria would be helpful before the exam. I helped with the event last spring, and it seemed to benefit students then. So that's sort of the contagion effect. It helped other people. I saw that, so I'm going to come back and do that, and probably brought some of their friends with them. And the dogs, 14 people said they came for the dogs. So that was pretty straightforward. Most of the people who said they didn't attend responded because they either didn't have time, or because they didn't care for dogs, or they didn't need it. So reasons why people chose to attend the event: stress reduction. I wanted to calm my nerves before I sat and took a test, and also to make sure I had plenty of time to relax my body. We had some students who were really into wellness. Some of them were even yoga instructors themselves. Wanting the opportunity to see classmates before the test, as well as de-stressing by petting dogs. So you see there's some crossover between, we probably would have coded that partially under the social support and partially under the stress reduction. A few were happy for the snacks, especially because they were a little nervous to eat in the morning. So then what effect did participation in the event have on you? So again, these are some representative responses. 17 responses indicated stress reduction. I think it allowed for me to feel less stressed about the exam, especially when speaking with those who took it previously. I believe participating in the wellness event relieved some test anxiety as well, because it allowed me to realize I know a great deal of information. So that kind of comes back to some of the things I'm able to do to have conversations with them or answer last minute questions about the curriculum. So that can be really helpful. Social support. It normalized my stress about the exam. It was nice to have a chance to have fun with the dogs and people and find things to laugh about. Playing with the dogs was both relaxing and distracting. It was helpful to have Nicole, that was a recent grad who'd taken the test, share a little bit about when she took the exam in the summer. I didn't expect to feel better after writing down my worry and placing it in the jar, but I actually did. It felt good to fully verbalize it. So letting them sort of visually or metaphorically cast away those stressors was important. So additional, what effect did the participation in the event have on you? Universality, the sense of community. Not going to read through all of these in the interest of time, wanting to leave some time for questions. The dogs. So the dogs came up again. Stormy was so sweet. I felt like she knew I was not relaxed, and I loved our interaction. It was nice knowing that others were just as stressed as I was. And then again, the food came up. Telling us about your experiences interacting specifically with the therapy dog. And so here are 5 themes that came up: that it was a calming effect, provided distraction, it was a positive experience, the friendliness of the dogs, and that it created some happiness. And that Stormy's happiness was contagious to them. If you look at the happy response: loved Stormy, very cute and excited to greet everyone. Her happiness made me happy and more relaxed and prepared. They tied that sense of happiness to their feeling prepared. I think that's particularly interesting. So a couple of others, words that came up with just a little bit less frequency were feeling relaxed, loved, comfortable, and comforted. And this particular quote kind of reminds me of that initial picture where I had Stormy a picture of Stormy looking into the eyes of a student. Stormy was adorable. I went over to her and she immediately came closer to me and allowed me to pet her. And she looked at me in my face so attentively that I really felt like she was just saying, it's going to be all right. So this is just a visual of the most frequently used items by semester. So you'll see the interactions with people in spring of 2019 was 29, almost 30%. And in the spring, the fall of 2019, it was about 26%. The interactions with therapy dogs, both semester was about 27, 28%. Snacks was always in third place. The stress and meditation toys was always in fourth. And then the quotes, paying attention to those on the walls, walking around, looking at things like that. Mindfulness coloring pages. Again, in the fall of 2019 was where I realized students couldn't bring those with them. So they might've just not felt like it, plus their positioning in the room. Moving to the main campus, we actually held it in the mindfulness room in Enger Office Annex, which is part of the Center for Contemplative Studies. And so there were tables and it was a little bit more conducive to creating the stations. They could sit and color. And then you'll see that in the spring of 2019, the gratitude jar and the mindfulness coloring pages, nobody used those. The worry jar was used a little bit more in the fall than the spring, but it was used both semesters. However, when all of these are rank ordered by most helpful, the therapy dogs were number 1 and interactions with people were number 2. So we need to talk about some practical considerations. So when we're talking about using animals, it's not just about the people they're serving. We also have to make sure that the animals are being cared for and not being distressed, being treated well. So the handler of a therapy animal is responsible for making sure that the animals are healthy and that they're attending to their needs. Also, if they need to use the bathroom, things like that. So first one is to make sure that you're bringing certified therapy animals who are insured to do this work and who are trained to do this work. Therapy animals are different than service animals in that they must be invited to the space. So you need to find out who is responsible for maybe making sure that that invitation comes, and who's responsible for any potential cleanup that might need to be done to sweep up fur, things like that. As you can see, Stormy's a short-haired dog, so she's not considered hypoallergenic. You do not have to be a hypoallergenic dog to be a certified therapy dog, but that might be something if you've got people around who might have allergies, you might need to work with facilities management, for example, to make sure that if a deep cleaning needs to be done after the event, that can be done. So finding out who's responsible for the invitations, and is the procedure for invitations different for ongoing programs versus a one-off program. So when I did the research on this one, I tried to find out, and because it was a one-off, it wasn't something that was going to be offered weekly or even regularly. I didn't really need a lot of permission. I just notified people were doing it. We got permission from Center for Contemplative Studies to be able to use their space, and that's all that it took. But something that's going to be a little bit more ongoing might require a little bit more permission. The other thing that's important is to match the therapy animal to the event. Not all therapy animals have the same personality. Yes, they've been temperament tested to be able to tolerate loud noises, not be skittish, to be comfortable around people. But Stormy is a very calm dog. Not all therapy dogs are as calm as she is. When she was participating in a weekly reading program at an elementary school, kindergarten, a lot of times some of the bigger dogs were a bit intimidating for some of the little kids who might not have as much experience. So a lot of times the teachers would particularly choose Stormy for certain kids because she looked a little bit more like their stuffed animals, a little bit more cute and cuddly in some respects versus like some of the German Shepherd, a little bit larger dogs. So those are some considerations. We also have to think about animal and human welfare, prevention of the transmission of zoonotic diseases. So having some hand sanitizer on you, having materials to clean up just in case there's the rare accident on the part of the animal. And again, making sure facilities management is involved as needed for cleaning up the space. The other thing that's important to consider are there consent forms necessary for bringing animals to campus for the students? In this particular case, again, they were self-selecting in. They weren't in a space that just a high traffic area where a lot of people were going. But depending on the campus and their requirements, there could be informed consent forms to participate that would be required. Animals have to be in good health and up to date on their vaccines. They have to be well groomed and maintained. They also, we need to be careful that they don't pick up any potential diseases from people. So I know some therapy dog organizations have started bringing animals back into environments, but I'm not vaccinated, and because of her original health issues, we're still pausing because of COVID, because you don't know there's still not a lot of information about the transmission of COVID in terms of to animals or through animals. And so we also want to make sure that the animals are happy, content, and not distressed. So the handler is responsible for managing that, and their animal is their primary responsibility. So that's been one of the things I have to navigate. I have to make sure that I attend to Stormy while I'm also responsible for the event, which is why I also need to have those students there to help support in case I have to take her out and step out. Allergies, pretty straightforward. We just want to make sure that if somebody has an allergy, maybe they've planned ahead to take a allergy medication ahead of time, or avoid touching the animals, though they might enjoy just being able to visibly see them, look into their eyes. And there is research that shows that you get an oxytocin release just from looking in their eyes. So some future research suggestions. To evaluate the role of the handlers in student outcomes and the benefits. Again, in this particular case, the handler was well known to the students, but in a lot of those other studies that I mentioned earlier, the handlers were not known to the participants. And then evaluating the role of social support and peer support in large scale events like the Therapy Dog Extravaganza, where students may drop in and may not know each other. I can tell you in some of the other large scale events right before the pandemic hit, there was a sort of it was a Friday night event for students to have an alternative to going out or having something to do. And the students would come and they would circle around Stormy, and some of them were repeat customers from prior Therapy Dog Extravaganzas, but getting them to talk to each other was challenging, even though they were first year students, were not feeling a sense of connection to campus, but still getting them to talk to each other around the animal, trying to develop those connections was a little bit challenging. So knowing a little bit more about the role of the animal as sort of a social lubricant would be helpful. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions, and I'll stop my share so I can see people who might have questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Alessandria. We run this very casually, so please, if you have a question, unmute yourself and ask away.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So do you know of any studies that compare different types of animals and their effectiveness as therapy animals? My hypothesis would be that dogs would win out hands down because of our 10 or 12,000 year association with them, but
I don't know of the specific studies, but so as therapy animals, if you were to go to like Pet Partners, that's one of the biggest certifying organizations for therapy animals. There are guinea pigs, there are other pocket pets that have been. I know you mentioned you have a pet rat earlier. If you think about three, pardon me, I did not mean to select any one over the others. How many of you can use your reaction? How many of you had a class pet at some point? Maybe a rabbit, a hamster, a guinea pig, something, right? And in schools, we see that a lot because it also teaches responsibility. They can teach empathy. There's a lot of other benefits that you might not really think of until you stop and really think about, like, how did you develop your interest in animals? What was your experience with them growing up versus somebody who might be a first-time dog owner or cat owner? So there's probably some literature out there, Walt, on that, but I didn't dig deep into that element of it. But dogs in particular, as therapy animals, because they're highly trainable and they're very social animals. Cats are a little less predictable in terms of their social interaction with others, but dogs they're pack animals and they're highly social. So that's another piece of it. And they're highly trainable. And in terms of service animals, they're actually the only animal that is qualified to be a service animal. I know there were some miniature horses out there at one point, but that has since changed. Therapy dogs are now where it's at.
The look on Stormy's face in those photos reminded me of, there's recent research that was done that showed that dogs have evolved muscles on their eyebrows and are very, very expressive. And
It is
we
very
respond to
true.
each other. We respond to some of the similar cues.
That is very true. Stormy is actually, believe it or not, beagles are very well known for their ability to vocalize. And she does vocalize. She will whine. She has a lot of different ranges, but she very rarely barks. And most often she tells me exactly what she wants through her eyes and her persistence. She will stare at what she wants and then she'll look at me and she'll look at it. It's called referential behavior, where they will actually tell you through their eye contact and what they're looking at, what they want. And with her, it's pretty much always food. Bananas are particular. If you have a banana around here, good luck. She will stare you down. Ashley, you just unmuted.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if Walt was done, but I'm curious about two things. One is most related to the work you've been doing and future plans and thinking around the fall semester or future testing situations of that nature. And then the second one is a little bit of a broader thought that I and some other colleagues have talked about who have dogs at home and how our pets may adapt to their caretakers or their family not being in such close proximity when, for example, Westchester goes back to our in-person instruction. So it's kind of like two parts.
Two parts. So the first one is I really haven't thought that far ahead. To be totally honest, I allowed her certification to lapse because it's an annual thing that you have to renew. I expect once I feel like it is safe for us to volunteer again, I will get that renewed and get back to that. But right now, given that my vaccination status is nil, and actually there was an event that Penn Medicine was doing today at 4, I think it is, on COVID and pets and what do we really know and the transmission and how safe is it for them. So hopefully a neighbor went or is going and can share with me, but I'll be teaching at that time, so I can't go. So I feel like there's still more that I want to know because her health has been fragile. That's why we don't go to hospitals, because she had a deep tissue skin infection that it's really for her health, not even for other people's health, that because she has to take antibiotics every day to keep her condition controlled. If she were to get an antibiotic resistant bug, it could be very life-threatening for her. But if there was a way to get her to do visits with people who have chronic health conditions, I think that would be a really nice parallel for them to see her survival and the metaphor and have conversations about that. So I'd have to check with her vets before we do that. In terms of me even thinking about it, like if somebody wanted to invite us to do a program like that, I would be open to it. I think there's a lot of coordination, especially now that we have to move the whole thing to main campus. And now that the IRB has expired. So I'd have to really think a little bit more about doing that or doing another study that would actually look at the role of the handler and more evaluation. As far as, I'm not an animal behaviorist, but I can tell you somebody over by my feet is a shadow unless I'm competing with the sun. There are certain times of day where sunbathing takes precedence, but wherever I go, she follows. And so I anticipate there will be some anxiety, and I think we'll probably be seeing veterinarians address, or animal behaviorists addressing or preparing us for the anxiety that our pets are likely to experience, and that can manifest in inappropriate chewing. So I would encourage you to plan ahead for where you will contain your animal so that the challenges will be minimal. Stormy already had inappropriate chewing when she gets anxious. If I go for a walk by myself, because she doesn't always love to take a walk, I get an earful when I get home. I like to narrate it. Why did you leave me? I didn't give you permission, but yeah. So, you know, some of those camera things where you can send them a treat through and monitor them with video. Some people might choose to do that. Just make sure you change your password so that you don't get hacked. But yeah, start planning now and having those conversations with your veterinarian or animal behaviorist. University of Pennsylvania's veterinary hospital has a whole division focused to animal behaviors.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We have 1 minute. Any other questions?
I have a couple. This is fascinating research. It seems convincing that animal-assisted interventions can help reduce stress. How can we take what you've learned and make it more available? Because it's not just, you know, the certification test that creates stress sometimes for students. And of course, there are students in all kinds of departments and colleges on campus taking stressful tests. Are there, you know, have you been able to think about any implications for the university to develop stress reducing strategies for all students?
I think that would be the logical next step. You know, our University Counseling Center has been actually at the forefront of this. Rachel Daltrey is the chair of the Counseling and Psychological Services, and they have one of the counselors there is sort of the outreach coordinator. So that's how Stormy ended up going to the residence hall. That's how Stormy's been involved in like Therapy Dog Extravaganza and other events in the evenings. And so they have different therapy dog organizations that they have vetted and said, okay, these people are allowed to come to campus to these events. But again, it also requires coordination with facilities management, getting the university on board. And I think it's gaining a lot of acceptance. And so, you know, Rachel likes to tell the story of how when she first brought Muddy to campus, she had to get permission. The university's attitude was like, well, we'll see how it goes until he bites somebody. And she's like, well, he's not going to bite it. So like getting the university involved, like up at the administrative level to talk about and developing policies. I think there are a lot of people on campus who would be open to this, but the challenge area is that because there are emotional support animals are a growing problem on college campuses where people are bringing pets to campuses because they're not trained, they're not certified. And so when you see any animal on campus, people can associate that and think about, well, they have their dog here, so I can bring mine, without necessarily realizing and understanding everything that went into that. So I think there's a lot of education that would also have to go into it to prepare a campus for that. I'm from the discipline of counseling, so more often than not, these programs are through counseling centers or wellness centers. So I think it's just a matter of a little bit more collaboration, as well as creating a little bit of an ease of the path to get those invitations to campus, because it was really hard to kind of know, where do I start with finding out who I need to get permission from to do the program. And I'll admit, I you know, when she was in training, stuff like that, I might have brought her to work a time or two when I was just passing by, but that is part of training. They have to be able to go to different places to be able to find out if they can be around large groups of people. She loves it. The bigger the swarm, the better for her. But other dogs might need a smaller crowd around them, might be better in one-on-one therapy dog interactions. Did I answer your questions?
Yeah, I think so. it just seems like there's a lot of potential to help students and probably the handlers and the staff who are associated with it too. I often miss my dog when I'm on campus, and it would be great.
Absolutely. I don't know if you heard her snore a minute ago, but that's one of the best parts. Like, it's very soothing. Most of the time it's a cute snore, but sometimes it's a really ugly snore. But hi, Happy.
There's another dog.
Yeah. The other thing I do want to say, that it takes a lot out of the animal. So, you know, like, we would go to an event for an hour, we'll come home and she will sleep the entire rest of the day. She does sleep a lot anyway, but like a hard sleep, like she doesn't get up to go drink and say, I want to go out. Like, she just zonks out. So that's the other thing. We do really have to pay attention to the animal's welfare, because you don't want to overuse the animal, because they can't really tell us. They can absorb the stress, but they can't really tell us. So you have to be cued into their behaviors that might be indicators of stress. And if anybody's interested, you can, I don't know when it's going to be offered next, but you can always take a look for my animal assisted therapy class, and we talk more about that there.
Well, we're at 12:55, and often people have to log off at this point to get to another class. So if you do have to, please go ahead. Tina, if you're available, if there's any last questions, we can keep the Zoom room open. But before we move on to that, I'd just like to thank you once again for being part of this series. Fascinating work that you've done, and we appreciate you making time to share it with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tina. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
Good to see you all. Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye. Take care.